Okay, so this is a departure from our normal Inkscape tutorial. This has actually come about by a project that my daughter wanted to do that made good use of Inkscape as a part of it. So what I'm going to show you today is how to take just a simple photo that you've put into Inkscape and create the vector graphics to go along with it, as well as this is a sewing pattern. I'm going to create a seam allowance for it as well so that we can then import it into the Cricut and have the Cricut draw the sewing line and cut out according to the seam allowance. It's a bit of a work for a one-time pattern, but for something that you're going to use repeatedly, like in this case doll clothing, that it's a useful skill to have all done up. So this is a vintage pattern, so it's copyright expired and everything, so I'm not concerned about sharing it, and it is part of some doll clothes that we're going to be making, so I might show a few more tutorials with that. So anyway, we're in Inkscape, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to show our layers. I already imported the ping. I have it over here. I've done this once for the sleeve and the bodice, and now I'm doing it for her shoes. So let me pull this down so we can see it all. There we go. So I have the ping imported and locked. I'm going to unlock it for a moment so that I can trace the bitmap. And that is where Inkscape does a bulk of the work for us, and then we just spend a lot of time cleaning it up. So we're going to trace the bitmap. It gives you an estimate of what it's going to look like over here. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We'll get a new picture over layered on top of here. It's done, so I'm going to close this window. I have my bitmap. I'm going to go ahead and add a layer, and we're going to call that shoes. And I'm going to pull this bitmap that we traced up onto the shoes layer. Move to layer, shoes. This is all pretty heavy work for the computer, so if you've got an older computer like me, there will be a couple of little glitches in it, but it's all okay. So I went ahead and locked the ping image so I can't accidentally drag it around, and I'm going to go ahead and make that no longer visible to cut down on some of the work my computer is doing, redrawing the screen. I'm going to use this edit node tool so that you can see this is really work heavy. You've got all of these nodes. It does a really detailed job of tracing the bitmap, and clearly we don't need it to be that well done. So the first thing we're going to go up here is do path and simplify. Takes a moment because there's a lot of stuff going on, and then that goes ahead and greatly simplifies it. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to do path break apart. And that's going to split each of these individual vector images into their own paths. It did what we want it to do, which is gave us nice black filled in paths. Sometimes it won't do that. You'll have a break in your design that will cause it to just give you the outline. We will go over that in another tutorial because that's its own set of complications. So right now under shoes, oh, I don't want to lock it. Okay, unlock that. I'm going to add sock because that's what this upper one is. Okay, so I'm going to select sock here. This is the outer one. You're going to see when I move it that I do have some other ones underneath it because it gave me a path for the outside of the line that it traced and the inside of the line that it traced, as well as all of the wording. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the layer sock. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and lock and turn sock invisible so I can delete everything underneath there that we didn't want in a moment. Okay, then I'm going to go over here, and this is the shoe upper. So I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to move this to that layer. And then you don't need to see me do the rest of these, so I'm going to quickly do that all on fast forward. Okay, that's all done. That's all of the stuff we needed from this design. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete my whole shoes layer and get rid of all of the stuff we don't need. And then we're only going to work on one of these today because they're all basically the same path. So I'm going to go ahead and pick, I think the most interesting one to me is the sock. So I'm going to unlock that. Actually, no. See, the sock has nice, neat corners here. I'm going to actually pick one that doesn't have those nice, neat corners. So let me look here. Yeah, it looks like the shoe upper could use some work. So we're going to pick that one. I'm going to unlock it. And the first set of things I'm going to do is just change it so that we only see the outline. So we're going to get our fill and stroke visible over here. I'm going to make it so that it has no fill and so that it has some nice bright green stroke paint. The reason why I want this to be bright green, so it's bright green there, but you can barely see it. I'm going to go over here and switch it so that it is 2 pixels. There. The reason why I want it to be bright green is because I'm going to be comparing this shoe to the original Ping image. And I want to be able to have it show up. I don't want it to be black. So now I'm going to zoom in on this. And we're going to try and make sure that our original design is as exact as possible. So this is what I was talking about. It doesn't always make good choices when setting up the corners. So when simplifying the path. So right here, it really should have kept the corner one, the corner node, but it kept this one down here on the side. And because of that, you get this rounded corner, which won't make for neat drawing lines or a neat cutting line. So I'm going to go ahead and move this one down some. We'll move this one over. Move this one, if I can select the actual node, yep, over so it's right on that corner. And then we'll clean up that mess that I just made. I want to move this one up to be on the corner too. It was almost there, but not quite. And then we're just going to play with the handles till we see that they are the way we want them to be. So this one's going to go up here. And then we want these ones in here, not the corner ones, to be smooth. So that's one thing we'll want to go through and do. I don't care if they're symmetric or not. I just want them smooth so that we don't get jaggy lines. That'll matter again when we go to make our seam allowance. There we go. This one does want to be a corner, and it wants to go straight down. This one wants to be a corner going straight down over here. Cleaning it up here a little bit. This guy doesn't want to be nearly so steep. And the better time you can take with this and do it not exact, but as close as possible to a nice smooth thing, the better off you're going to be as far as getting your sewing pattern just right. Again, I'm just going through and making these smooth. They all look pretty smooth, but when we go to do our seam allowance, it'll be pretty obvious if they're not. Okay, I'm almost done. I just want this one to be a little bit sharper. And because of that and the smoothness, I just got to bring this one down a little bit and this one out a little bit to create that look. Okay, so that looks good to me. That is our drawing line, because remember, these are vintage patterns. They don't come with a seam allowance. And I need to add that in if I'm going to have the Cricut go ahead and print this. If you have a more modern pattern that has its seam allowance built in, that at this point you could just export this over to your Cricut and it would print it as it is. So that's my shoe upper. I want to save for a moment so that when I mess up, it's good. Now I want to make sure that my seam allowances are actually 1/2 inch. What that means is that I need to measure on my original pattern what size this shoe is. So I'm going to go get my original pattern and measure it from the height here. So I'm going to measure up from this corner all the way down to this corner right here, and see how high it is, because we're going to want to scale this, and while we're scaling it, we're also going to scale the sole, the cardboard sole, the trim, and the sock all at the same time so that they stay in the correct proportions. So my height is 2.8 inches for this. So I'm going to go up to my object, my object, and I want to do transform. And that brings up a new window over here, a new tab over here. And I want to scale. So first thing I want to do is to know that my current height is 16.972. So, and I said I want it to be, no, that's not accurate. That is for my whole pattern. Let me take my layers, make my ping not visible. I just have my shoe visible right now. I'm going to change this to percent. I want it to be 100%. And then I'm going to switch it back to inches, and I get 4.025 inches. I'm going to switch that to 2.8 inches because that's what I want it to be. And then I'm going to switch this back to percent. I could also go do these calculations in on a calculator, but this is easier. So I get 69.583%. Now I don't personally mind my shoes being a little bit bigger, so I'm going to switch this over to a nice 70% for my height. But before I go ahead and transform it, I'm going to select the other pieces that I want. My cardboard sole, my trim, and my sock. And then I'm not going to select all. I'm going to go up here to my menu and pick select all in all layers. Now, this is a little bit tricky. It doesn't actually select all of them. It selects all of the visible unlocked images in all of the areas. So I'm going to select all in all layers. And I want to actually select my ping too, so that when I go to modify the others, they're modified as well. So again, go back here, select all in all layers, and then I'm going to go to my transform. I'm going to do 70%. I want to make sure I'm scaling proportionally, and I do not want to apply it to each object separately. I want to apply it to the whole thing so that they all scale down and stay in the same relative position that they are right now. I'm going to hit apply. And as you see, they all scaled down. They all stayed at the same place they were on our pattern. So I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to turn all of these other ones off. And I only have to do that the one time because they were all together on the same initial ping image. I don't have to do that again. So now I have my shoe upper and I want to create a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go to my fill and stroke, and what I'm going to do is change this line to be 1 inch. And the reason I'm doing 1 inch instead of a 1/2 an inch because it centers on itself from that inner line. So I have to do a 1 inch line in order to get the 1/2 inch on the outside. You'll see what that looks like in a minute. So 1 inch line. It's huge, it's crazy. As you can see, this is why I noted that if it wasn't smooth, you'd notice it even more so in the larger image. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Undo that. I want to duplicate it first because I want to keep my original trace line. Now I'm going to go ahead and say the new one wants to be 1 inch. Perfect. And I'm going to take this new one and I'm going to go over here and say stroke to path. Right now, we still have our same, give that a chance to catch up, our same nodes as before on the inside of this stroke. What I want to do is treat this like it's a new object and get nodes all along the outside and the inside of the path. So again, I'm going to come up here and do stroke to path. That gave me 2 separate paths, the inside of the line and the outside of the line. We're going to do like we did before, and we're going to break those 2 paths apart. So this one looks like it disappeared. Really what happened is it just got a color fill on its own. And I'm going to go ahead and unselect the outer one. I have this inner one selected now, and I'm just going to delete it because I don't need it. Now this outer one, you might be a little worried again because we lost that nice defined line. All that is that its fill and stroke has gone to a solid fill and no stroke. So I'll go over here to my fill, no fill again. The stroke isn't there yet. We need to add that. It's going to be crazy large because that is our 1 inch stroke. So we're going to go over to stroke style, and we just want it to be 1 pixel. And now we have our nice defined sewing line and our cutting line for the Cricut for our seam allowance. And that's again for a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and make my inner line now that I'm done and I see everything, just 1 pixel. And this is all ready for exporting and saving and importing into the Cricut, which I will do in the next video.